A Giants podcast for Giants fans
by Giants fans.
It's Shaun Morash.
On the sideline, into the end zone. Touchdown, Giants!
From the offseason to the wins and the losses, it's time to take one Giant step.
Welcome into One Giant Step, a week 6 preview edition. Giants on Sunday Night Football ahead of a big game with the Cincinnati Bengals. Yes, we are sitting here saying big game for the New York Football Giants. I'm Shaun Morash. He's Bryce Gelman. Thank you, as always, for joining us on One Giant Step. And if it's your first time listening, welcome aboard. Remember, you can download, subscribe to One Giant Step everywhere podcasts are available, and, of course, free on the Audacy app. The 2-3 Giants, the 1-4 Bengals, the G-Men 3.5-point underdogs as the Bengals come roaring into MetLife looking to basically save their season. And the Giants really looking to kind of make playoff hope feel real, Bryce. Before we get into all the injury problems and a little fantasy reality, where are you at here? Thursday, removed from the Seattle Seahawks game, and Giant vibes here, as the vibes are immaculate in New York sports as they see it right now.
Listen, I've got some hope. I wouldn't say I'm too hopeful for this game. I think the Giants can win it. You couldn't have said that at the start of the season. Probably couldn't have said that last week going into the Seahawks game. You kind of looked at this game as automatic loss. It is not that whatsoever anymore. So I guess like reasonable expectations going into this game. I wouldn't say too hyped, but who knows, man? Who knows?
Yeah. You never know. And we'll get to Malik Nabers in a second, because as it stands right now is very similar to how it stood last Thursday when we taped this podcast, which is simply we still don't know, which tends to feel negative about the Giants situation right now. But we did get really more negative news and kind of definitive news. Felt like out of nowhere, Kayvon Thibodeaux of the Giants obviously fractures some sort of wrist bone, a scaphoid, I think is the name of it. So all the medical doctors on Twitter and the internet seem to think it's a 4 to 6 week injury that tends to lean towards the earlier side, depending on recovery and whatnot. And if you don't get it taken care of, like Kayvon already did with surgery and a screw, it could lead to, major arthritis problems down the line. So it felt like the Giants, obviously, with a lot invested in Kayvon and hopefully a lot invested long-term when his contract does come up in another year or so, wanted to take care of this now, which feels smart for the young man, feels smart medically, but it does feel like an enormous blow because Bryce, and perhaps this is on us, perhaps this is on all Giant content creators, as we've gotten so caught up in the vortex of Brian Daboll, job security. Oh, wait, Daboll's a great coach. Daniel Jones. Oh, look at the way Daniel Jones is playing. All the flowers we've given the O-line. All the accolades we've given Malik Nabers. As we sit here after 5 weeks, everything you would want out of Kayvon Thibodeaux in year 3 in terms of an ascending player at the pass rush position, Kayvon Thibodeaux is giving. I've gone back now. I rewatched these games, dude. The stats may not show it. The last 3 weeks, Kayvon Thibodeaux is just a savage playing and was so paramount on Seattle. I don't know if you've even noticed this too. I've done like a big key in on the D-line. Kayvon has been awesome, dude. This is going to be a big loss. But you kind of rolled your eyes. You don't think he has been.
Well, we discussed it earlier on this year. Like both of these guys, Brian Burns and Kayvon Thibodeaux, are going to have a really easy time when it comes to one-on-ones on the outside. Like you can have good reps every other time, potentially get to the quarterback because your defensive tackle needs to be triple, sometimes quadruple teamed.
Go back and watch the Kayvon double teams for
I'm not discrediting anything he's done as a pass rusher this year in his 3rd season in the NFL. But to say that it's going to be an immense loss to where you're going to notice very much so that he's not in the backfield constantly, I wouldn't say that. But again, you've got Azeez Ojulari, who had a really good game against the Browns. It's why you held on to him for depth. He has shown that he can hold his own. I think that it's not that big of a downgrade from Kayvon to Azeez. I mean, listen, Kayvon is a great talent. I'm not discrediting him here, but Azeez is not the worst backup in the world to have to slot him right in there behind Kayvon when Kayvon gets hurt, Shaun.
Oh, look, there's two things can be true here. I do think Kayvon is a major loss, but I do now love the depth. When the problem with the Giants the last couple of years is you couldn't count on Azeez Ojulari's health. And when Azeez Ojulari went down, what are we talking about? Jihad Ward, who couldn't rush the passer, was just strictly a run player, stepping up, something like that. Part of the beauty of when they got Brian Burns and Thibodeaux's ascension was now Azeez Ojulari became the third guy. And oh, by the way, Azeez Ojulari played really well in the Washington game when he got advanced snaps. They still have Isaiah Simmons who could be used as a chess piece. I love that this is another example of building depth on the team. The Giants have depth. We also walk away from a week in week one where on the offensive side of the ball, we thought they were dead to rights without Malik Nabers and to a lesser extent Devin Singletary. And it might have been the best the offense has looked all season long in terms of just moving the ball up and down the field. So from there, for the first time in a long time, I don't love these injuries, and I think Kayvon is a really big deal, but I'm not hopeless. A week ago, I sat here as we were wrapping up the pod going, man, if Nabers doesn't play, I don't see a way, and I feel hopeless. That's what that win in Seattle did with that next man up and showing the coaching on this team. And also, I've seen these Ojulari feet. So I don't think the Giants are hopeless without him, and they better not be because the team is too good to just simply lose 4, 5, 6 games because you don't have Kayvon Thibodeaux. But it's just more, this was such a big year for Kayvon, and now he's going to miss multiple weeks. And I've now seen it with my own 2 eyes. Everything you want in the 5th overall pick in the 3rd year, where you already knew he was a good player, but you question whether he could become a great player, he was beginning to make those strides. And I think that's what I find really, really frustrating that we don't get to. Now, his season's not over, and he might walk back into the Giants in the thick of something at, whatever it might be, 4-5 and 5-4. You never know. You dare to dream, and they're right in the midst of it. And the Giants are playing the smart. But I do think that this injury sucks. But it is on Azeez Ojulari starting reps. And frankly, on Brian Burns, too. Elevate your game a little more. So, and he's fought off some double teams. And the way Dexter Lawrence is playing, anybody on those edges should feast a little bit. Now let's get to the Malik Nabers point. Okay, we are taping this now Thursday afternoon, a little later than we usually tape it. And the reason for that is I wanted to see it around 12:30 when the media gathered at Giants practice, what was going to be the deal with Malik Nabers. I was told by some people around the facility on Wednesday night that the belief was he would have taken the next step by Thursday. He has not. He is still in stage 3 of protocol, making Friday's practice a really big deal. If he is not in some kind of limited role on Friday, he will be officially declared out. If he is in a limited role on Friday, there's a loophole in the concussion protocol. Even though the team won't have a full practice Saturday, he can technically be declared a full participant and clear. Friday is always going to be a big day in concussion protocol day. But I got to be honest, Bryce, my gut tells me very negative, right? If you really think of it this way, the concussion now is 2 weeks ago today. He missed the Sunday game in Seattle, didn't travel with the team. The idea that he's still in stage 3, and I know stage 4 and 5, when you get there, they happen very quickly. So I want everybody to understand that. Like, it can be done. And when he gets to stage 4 or 5, seemingly, for most part, is usually bam, bam, you're there. But it's crazy. I mean, I know he looked knocked unconscious. He probably was. 2 weeks later, and concussions are no joke. Look at obviously what's happened with Tua in his career. This feels disheartening, man. I mean, the idea, I thought after 10 days off, he'd be back for Seattle to miss the Cincinnati game. If you would have told me that leaving that Cowboy game, this feels crazy.
Yeah, I mean, 2.5 weeks is a long time to be out for concussion. The fact that we don't know, I agree, is a negative. It 100% is. We planned on doing this, as you said, at a reasonable time, expecting to know by now. The fact that we don't, it can't be positive, Shaun. I mean, obviously, something miraculous can happen. We're not. It's not out of the question. But the fact that it hasn't by now is definitely a little concerning. A bunch of non-answers by Dable in the presser yesterday. I'd like to hear more, and we will hear more, just not.
Concussions are tricky, though. I'm actually going to give Dable a pass because, especially in this day and age, the NFL concussions, you don't want to mess around and say the wrong thing.
I'm not saying Dable should say more, but he hasn't said anything, which tells you all you really need to know. I think that this offense looked really good last week. I think if they were a mess. And it was so evidently clear that the Giants could only rely on Malik Nabers going forward, then this loss would feel larger than it is going to feel if he doesn't indeed play. So I see what happened last week. I see Daniel Jones with yet another week in the top 10 in a quarterback rating. Let's do it again. Like, you don't necessarily need your number one guy if you were able to play as well as you did last week.
That's my worry, Bryce, before we get to fantasy and reality here. It was evident, again, I encourage anybody, if you have the time, whether it's setting the DVR, buying the NFL Pass, to go back and watch games. Because I think as a fan, I mean, unless you're not a nut job like me, you watch the game passionately, right? We're complaining about refs almost every other play. You're just, let's go. You're cheering yourself, slapping hands, whatever. But once you take all the emotion, you know what's happened. This is why I like rewatching games. It was so evident from basically the jump with the Giants, and I know what happened on that first series where they come down and it goes the other way and everything. The different edge and emotion, it felt like Daniel Jones really took it personal. Hey, we're going on the road to Seattle. This has to be on me. And he owned that moment.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he can't do that again because he's actually had a fine year quarterbacking. And last week really helped take the step when he hit the 2 deep balls to Darius Slayton, one of which was a touchdown. Yeah. But you kind of deflate yourself when you go out there. Can you really ramp up all of that, like, next man up emotion when you're missing your best player for a second straight game? Also, I don't know what it is, but when the Giants come back home, Daniel Jones seemingly is more comfortable on the road than he's at home. Figure that one out.
And the primetime aspect as well, which I'm going to get into in a little bit. Yeah.
I'll just bring up the primetime thing now, too.
I got some stats for you.
This is the, a movable force meets the immovable object thing? What do you call that?
I think you're
whatever the saying is.
Immovable force meets an no.
The
Unstoppable force meets the immovable object. There you go.
The Giants in prime time, Daniel Jones, which, by the way, all the losses are not on his plate, but we saw it with Dallas. He just couldn't make that extra play. The Bengals have lost 9 of their last 10 primetime games, are never seemingly good in these primetime games. So whichever team sucks less in primetime, these are probably the 2 worst primetime teams over the last 5 years, which is hard to believe because the Bengals have been good. So here we are in that spot again. We'll see. But I want to believe, as you can tell, I'm more positive than I was last week, but I'm trying to withhold jumping both feet into positivity without Malik Nabers. I got to be honest. If Kayvon and Malik Nabers were full goes right now, and we knew nothing about the Kayvon injury, I'd be waving the pom-poms right now going, man, I think the Giants could beat the Bengals by like 10, 13 points because the Bengals are reeling right now. Yeah. And they're a real problem. And we'll get to fantasy and reality in just a second where I'll explain more of that. But it just gives me that hesitation. It's like, damn, we can't just fully enjoy this yet because I have all the reasons to be skeptical still.
Yeah, and what I wanted to bring up is I got some stats from Daniel Jones in primetime games over his career. 12 touchdowns, 19 interceptions, 64% completion percentage, and a 71.4 quarterback rating. So there is a trend there, and it is a largely negative trend. Going into a game, as you mentioned, against the Bengals, where you said what? Joe Burrow has lost 9 of 10 games in primetime. It gives him an opportunity, Daniel Jones, to thrive. And we discussed it before. I'm a little concerned over the fact that it's going to be another home game, and Daniel Jones has not fared well at home games this year. One of them was a primetime game, the first game of the season against the Vikings, Shaun. I'm going to give him a pass, considering the fact the Vikings are now 5-0 and look like one of the best teams in the NFL. So I'm not going to hang that loss totally. Yeah, I'm not going to hang that loss totally on them. They had no film to go off of, so they were completely blind going into that game, and they got obliterated. And, of course, at the time, we were expecting the season to go to you-know-what. We expected Daniel Jones to be this awful quarterback in his 6th year. That has not been the case. He is on a better trend, but looking at the other trend, which is he's not great in primetime, and he kind of sucks at home, it's another concern to add on top of the 2 injuries that the Giants are likely going to face going into this week.
There's no question about it. All right, Bryce, let's get to fantasy versus reality and what is a big Sunday night game here. I mean, a game that NBC may have questionably tried to flex out of to go to Ravens Commanders, and it's the New York Giants with the better record heading into this game than the Cincinnati Bengals, who many, including me, thought were a Super Bowl team before the year. I'll lead it off because I feel like we're in a good rhythm of doing this with fantasy reality where I lead it off. Yep. My fantasy play. I'm going to stay away from the running back situation, which I do want to touch on real quickly. I think Devin Singletary is going to play. I think Devin Singletary still will be very live for anytime touchdown bets or whatever, but I think I would stay away from yardage props and such with Singletary because I do think you're going to get more of a split share. And how could you not after everything Tyrone Tracy brought to the table? Now, they used Eric Gray around the goal line. I think they're still going to use Singletary plenty around the goal line, but I don't know how much that split share is going to happen. But Singletary, I think, will still eat around the red zone. But that's not going to be my fantasy play in this game. My fantasy play in this game, I'm going back to it, baby. Theo Johnson. I think we take another step. I was on it last week that the tight ends had to be more involved. And I think the one benefit to not having Malik Nabers and having the game unfold as a result of not having Malik Nabers was the confidence that Daniel Jones seemed to get. First of all, he always has that confidence with Darius Slayton, and that's an obvious one. I'll stay away from picking Slayton just in case Nabers does give it a go. But I do think that he looks at the tight end game, and Brian Dable will as well as a real threat. Theo Johnson earned some trust with the 4 catches he had last week. It wouldn't shock me in the least if there's another 4 or 5 catches working the middle of the field versus Bengals defense. And as a result, maybe Theo Johnson get used in the red zone and you pop him one for a touchdown. So that's going to be my fantasy play. I'm interested to see the evolution of the tight end game now that it finally got going a week ago. The reality of this game, look, this is what's still going to give me optimism. How do you beat the New York Giants? I think after 5 weeks, I can kind of definitively say this. You got to be disciplined in sticking to the run. If you run the heck out of the ball versus the Giants, eventually the Giants defense, especially without Kayvon, who's a pretty good run defender, the Giants defense will wilt. You will get third downs, and you will kind of keep their pass rush at bay. The Giants do lead the league in freaking sacks, and that's mainly in part to Dexter Lawrence, but they get sacks from the secondary and everything. The problem is the Cincinnati Bengals are so damn stubborn. I mean, it's the reason Joe Mixon is gone. They bring in Zach Moss. They can't help themselves in sticking to the run. They want Burrow just slinging it all over the place to Higgins and Jamar Chase. And normally that should scare you. And it's not to say that Chase or Higgins won't have their moments or won't have their plays. Big moment here for Deonte Banks to stack back-to-back good performances. But the reality of the game is if the Bengals are going to not run the ball as often as they should, stay in your game as a defense and do what you were doing. Force these third and longs. And yeah, the Bengals are going to convert a couple, but they're not going to convert any. And if you're keeping the Bengals to a 23, 24 put output or less, which I think is very much on the table. The Bengals got to 30, yes, last week, but I think the Giants can keep them there. I think this Giant offense is good enough without Malik Nabers because of the offensive line and the pass protection to get them to go find a way to win a game 27-24, 27-26. So to me, it's all about just keeping the game defensively like you're having and playing to the matchup. And the reality is if the Bengals don't run the ball a lot, I think Giants going to be right there at the end. Win, loss, draw. This game is not going to get away from them as long as the Bengals don't run the ball the way they should be and the way they refuse to. So my game pick for the game, I am going to pick the Giants to lose the game. I am. I think it's a heartbreaker Sunday night, but I think it's a game that we've seen over the years where you walk away going, damn, wish we had that one, just like we wish we had the Commander game, but you could see it. You could see this team's watchable. I'm going to go Bengals 26, Giants 24. The Bengals happen to have the ball last and kick a long field goal to win this game late on Sunday night, setting up the Giants at 2-4 awaiting the Philadelphia Eagles, but us maybe feeling good about this thing. By the way, if I knew for sure that Malik Nabers was playing and Kayvon Thibodeaux was there, I could easily flip the score. I just think the Giants are going to lack this and the moment of desperation for the Bengals and Joe Burrow in primetime. Give me the Bengals here.
All right. I fantasy-wise, I cannot believe I'm saying this right now. If you would have asked me before the season, are you ever going to pick this player? I probably would have said no. In week 6, Shaun, against the Bengals, I have Daniel Jones. I think when you look at the 3 performances that the Bengals defenses have had in the last 3 weeks, allowing 38 points to a Commanders team. And listen, Jaden Daniels is an otherworldly talent. He's unbelievable. 260 yards, 2 touchdowns to Andy Dalton, 24 points to the Panthers. And then I have Lamar Jackson in fantasy. He put up 33 points for me last week. So the Bengals have shown that they are susceptible, especially to the dual threat quarterback. And we've seen Daniel Jones run as much as we want him to sit in the pocket and stop taking these massive hits. He's going to continue to do that. And just knock on wood, there's no other neck injury, but he's going to continue to get out of the pocket and he's going to continue to run the ball directly into these defenders. And I think that the dual threat quarterback that Daniel Jones is in the last 4 weeks, he has been in the top 10 in quarterback rating. He has been a top 10 quarterback in the NFL over the last 4 weeks, Shaun. So I think that trend continues. I think he plays another great game. Without Malik Nabers, it kind of gives me pause, and it made me think that this wouldn't be the best pick, considering the fact he doesn't have his wide receiver 1. But I think after what we saw last week, I'm going to have to ride him in this week because, I don't know, Nabers or not, he's going to be able to connect with the deep ball, especially. We saw it with Darius Slayton. They have this camaraderie. When Daniel Jones is throwing it well, Darius Slayton's open a lot of the time. As long as he puts it exactly where it needs to be, they will complete those passes. So
and
now,
the Bengals' top corner, Dax Hill, now lost for the year as well.
Okay, there you go. And now talking about the reality of this game, as I mentioned, a lot of high-scoring games with the Bengals. They've scored 30-plus in the last 3 weeks. I don't think that trend continues. I think this Giants defense is great at containing opposing offenses. I don't want to talk about the first week against the Vikings. That week is a fluke, Shaun. That week doesn't count to me. But what we've seen, this Giants defense, they don't allow a lot of points. They don't. They get to the quarterback. They force you to make reads that you don't want to make. They're the lowest amount of time they give opposing quarterbacks to throw the ball. So I think in this game, they're gonna hold the Bengals offense, which has been really explosive recently, to 24 points. But I think the Giants score 20. I think they lose the game. I think Joe Burrow goes down. They score a touchdown at the end of the game. This game is so much more. It's important for both teams, but I think it's much more important for the Bengals because you can make the argument, Shaun, if they lose this week, the season, I wouldn't say is over. They could be in major jeopardy to not make the playoffs.
No, look,
they have a lot more to prove. They have a lot more pressure on them.
Giants are alive.
Has not been great.
Giants lose this game in this NFC. They're alive with a win versus Philly the following week. So that is true.
Absolutely. And I do still think that it's very important for a guy like Daniel Jones to go out there and continue to prove the haters wrong. There's always going to be something from the fans. There's always going to be something from the media to put down Daniel Jones. And this week it is primetime and home games. He has got a great opportunity to prove everyone wrong who is giving him you-know-what for how bad he's been in primetime and how bad he's been at home.
All right. That's going to wrap it right here. Brycey and I will be back probably Monday morning with a late Sunday game. We'll figure this out, and we'll recap Giants and Bengals. So the good vibes continue here for Giants football and for this New York sports. Mets onto the NLDS. We'll see about the Yankees by the time you're listening. NLCS. We'll see about the Yankees by the time we're listening to this. And the Rangers are 1-0. All right. Thank you, everybody. Bryce Gelman, me, Shaun Morash, at Bryce Gelman, at Shaun Morash. Thanks to everybody for taking one giant step with us.